The story begins at the end of the 19th century in the grand estate of Blenheim Palace, England. There, a child was born, named Winston Leonard Spencer Churchill, a child whose veins carried royal blood, but destiny had not written a royal life for him. Churchill's childhood wasn't golden, it was lonely. His father, Lord Randolph Churchill, was a strict politician, and his mother, Jenny Jerome, a beautiful yet distant American woman. A boy surrounded by palace walls, but his parents' attention was always elsewhere. He often sat with his nurse, and whenever a letter from his mother arrived, he would gently touch the paper, as if those words carried her warmth. But her touch was never his to feel. Churchill once wrote in his memoirs, "My father treated me as if I belonged to another species, and my mother, she was like light, always slipping through my fingers." That loneliness ignited a silent rebellion within him, a fire that never burned out. Time passed. Churchill was sent to boarding school, where he was weak in studies, but unbreakable in confidence. Teachers called him a failure, but he knew one day he would make his own name in the world. One day when a teacher mocked him, saying, "Churchill, you'll never become anything," he smiled and replied, "Sir, I'll become someone the world will never forget." That was the moment a dream was born, a dream that began as ridicule, and that very ridicule forged a man of steel. During his school years, he was deeply fascinated by history. He loved stories of wars, kings, and heroes. He often told his friends, "The fate of the world isn't written by pens, it's written by courage." But fate was ready to test that courage. When he applied to the Sandhurst Military Academy, he failed 3 times. 3 times, but on the 4th attempt, he succeeded. That moment wasn't just victory, it was a declaration of his indomitable spirit, a spirit that the entire world would one day witness. At the academy, Churchill learned about war, strategy, and valor, but what he truly mastered was conquering fear. He often said to his friends, "If you fear, your dreams will laugh at you." During those youthful days, he began writing. He penned short essays about war, politics, and the philosophy of power. Those writings later became the foundation of his political beliefs. It was an age when great empires ruled the world. Churchill wanted to be part of those stories. He wanted his name written in history beside victory, but history had trials waiting for him. As he left college for his first battlefield assignment, his eyes carried one dream, the dream of becoming great. But deep inside, a quiet fear lingered that the world might never see him for what he truly wished to be, a man remembered not as a hero, but as a necessity of history. That was Winston Churchill's first journey, a boy raised in solitude, but fueled by dreams, a young man who fell countless times, yet rose each time to astonish the world. He didn't know then that the path ahead was not just a road to triumph, but a journey into the very cost of humanity. Wars may begin on battlefields, but a politician's war is always fought within his conscience. Churchill's story had now entered the roar of youth. He was no longer just a boy. He was becoming the man destiny had chosen to carry the weight of the world. 1895, Cuba. At just 21, Churchill witnessed his first military campaign. But here's what few know. He wasn't there as a soldier, but as a war correspondent. He craved the roar of battle to make his name known. He wanted to be where bullets flew and reality revealed its true face. For the first time, he came face to face with death. But ironically, he hadn't gone there to take lives. He had gone there to write stories. That was when Churchill understood the world. If you don't write your own story, someone else will make you the villain. Upon returning, he wrote his first book, The Story of the Malakand Field Force. 1898, based on the British Army campaign in what is now Pakistan's Swat region. Churchill had taken part in that war himself. Sitting in a mountain pass, he wrote in his journal, "This land may seem silent, but beneath it, history speaks." Few know that during that campaign, Churchill barely escaped death one night. A bullet from an Afghan fighter grazed past him, and he later wrote, "For the first time, I felt how fate can change in a second, but courage can be forged in one too." These experiences turned him into iron. When he returned, he was no longer just a soldier. He had become a soldier of words. He began to write, to speak, and soon his name echoed through London's political air. By 1900, at just 26, Winston Churchill became a member of Parliament. But then came the turning point. He rebelled against his own party. Yes, a fact many forget. Churchill switched political parties twice in his career. He began in the Conservative Party, but when he felt it was too narrow for his free spirit, he joined the Liberal Party. It was a dangerous move. In those days, changing parties was seen as political suicide, but Churchill declared, "I am not a slave to any party. I am a soldier only of my reason and conscience." Many called him an opportunist, but in truth, he was a reformer. He wanted better lives for workers, farmers, and ordinary citizens. He was one of the first to push for labor reforms and the minimum wage. The media branded him a rebel, and politics turned its back on him. That was when his political isolation began. By 1908, as Home Secretary, he sought to reform the prison system, a part of his legacy few mention. Churchill proposed human rights reforms for prisoners, saying a prison should punish the crime, not destroy the humanity of the man. The irony, years later, Churchill himself would become a prisoner, not of a cell, but of the moral weight of war. 1911. The Admiralty. Now Churchill commanded the power of the seas, and you'll be surprised to know he was the first politician to predict the future dominance of submarines and air power. He said, "In the wars of the future, it won't be the land that decides, it will be the sky." No one believed him then. 30 years later, he was proven right. Then came 1915, the Gallipoli disaster, the moment Churchill's career collapsed. As First Lord of the Admiralty, he planned the attack on Gallipoli, Turkey. Thousands of British soldiers died, and Churchill was blamed. The world turned its back on him. He was dismissed from government, and newspapers called him the butcher of young soldiers. But he said something then that history still remembered. "I watched my dreams collapse, but in their ashes I found my new path." After the defeat, Churchill left politics and rejoined the army as a frontline officer. Yes, a former minister went to war with a gun in his hand. Few know this truth. He slept in trenches with common soldiers, ate with them, and laughed in the face of death. One soldier once asked him, "Sir, you've been a prime minister. Why are you here?" Churchill replied, "Because I am not just a politician. I am a man, and a man must face his own mistake." Those were the years that forged Winston Churchill in fire. He lost power, but gained his soul. He returned to politics, but now he was no longer the same man. He had learned that true power is not in the chair, but in the courage to speak the truth. The world had barely recovered from the First World War when time prepared another storm, a storm that would change history itself, and at its very center stood one man, Winston Churchill. When the world sank into darkness, one man awakened a nation with nothing but his voice. This is World War II, and Churchill's war that history could only witness, but humanity would forever feel. 1939. The world once again stood on the brink of war. In Germany, Hitler's star was rising high, and Europe was breathing under the shadow of fear. Churchill, at that time, stood on the edge of British politics, a man long dismissed as a failure. But destiny loves to begin its stories from the very point where others see the end. When Germany invaded Poland, Britain faced a choice: silence or resistance. And on September 3, 1939, Churchill spoke the words that changed history. "We shall never surrender. We shall never give in, whatever the cost may be." It was not just the voice of a leader, it was the echo of a nation's soul. When Churchill became Prime Minister, he was 65 years old. The world believed he was finished, but inside him still burned the same fire that had lived since his youth. Now, that fire was no longer personal. It was a light for all humanity. Few know this. During those years, Churchill hardly slept. He would rest only 2 or 3 hours at night, then rise to read war reports and deliver speeches in Parliament without pause. His secretary later wrote, "Churchill lived 2 lives, one the world saw and one that wept in the dark." 1940, the Dunkirk evacuation. Britain's army stood on the edge of total destruction. Thousands of soldiers were trapped at sea. Churchill was told, "We should negotiate." He replied, "If Britain is to fall, then she will fall standing, not kneeling." Those words thundered through history. Because of his resolve, 338,000 soldiers were rescued from Dunkirk. He wasn't there in person, but his voice sailed with every boat that crossed the sea. The London Blitz, 1940 to 1941. As German planes rained bombs on London, Churchill would walk among the ruins each night, placing his hand on people's shoulders, saying, "It's only the walls of your houses that have fallen. Your courage still stands tall." Those words became not a slogan, but a prayer. Meanwhile, his voice echoed through the BBC, stronger than any weapon on the battlefield. But there was another war, a silent one. Churchill himself spoke of his black dog, his metaphor for depression. Yes, the same man who inspired a world often sat alone at night, fighting his own darkness. He drank, smoked cigars, and wrote, saying, "Writing is my war." 1945, victory in Europe. The world celebrated. Germany was defeated. Churchill was hailed as a hero. Yet history can be cruel. That same year, he lost the election. The man who had saved the world was no longer prime minister of his own nation. When told the results, he stood silently, then smiled faintly and said, "That is democracy. She gives you the crown and takes it away too." It was then the world realized Churchill's greatness did not lie in power, but in his humanity. 1946, Zurich speech. Europe lay in ruins. Churchill spoke the words that still echo today. Europe must learn from its past. We must build a United States of Europe so that these wounds never open again. That vision would later inspire the foundation of the European Union. In his final years, Churchill suffered several strokes, yet he turned to painting. Yes, he picked up a brush and searched for peace in colors. He said, "When politics exhausted me, I found rest in paint." Few know he created over 500 paintings, now among the world's rarest historical collections. In 1953, he received the Nobel Prize in Literature, a politician winning the highest honor in writing, because his words were not mere speeches, they were the heartbeat of history. January 24th, 1965, the same date his father had died, Winston Churchill left this world. As his funeral passed through London, thousands stood silently along the River Thames to bid farewell to their hero. That day, every ship on the Thames sounded its horn, and the river itself seemed to whisper, "Goodbye, Sir Winston." Winston Churchill was indeed a politician, but his true place was not in power. It was in the heart of humanity. He taught us that true courage is not the absence of fear. It is speaking the truth despite it. This is not just the story of a leader, but of a man who, amid the noise of history, never stopped listening to his conscience. Winston Churchill is gone, yet his words still echo, reminding us that within every human, a battle is being fought, and victory belongs to those who refuse to surrender, even in defeat.